Chapter 26, Section 2, Preparing for War in Europe. In late December 1941, Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill met in Washington, D.C. Their purpose was to devise a strategy to help the Allies defeat the Axis powers. They knew they could not afford to fight an offensive war on two fronts, Europe and the Pacific, at the same time. So, at this early date, they decided on a strategy of Europe first. They would concentrate most of their forces on winning back Europe, while initially fighting a defensive war against Japan in the Pacific. Axis powers rolled across Europe into North Africa. By the time the United States entered World War II, the Axis powers controlled most of Europe. Great Britain had saved itself by fighting off an intense German air attack during the Battle of Britain, but the country was running out of money and resources. On the Eastern Front, the Nazis had invaded the Soviet Union, using blitzkrieg tactics to overcome Soviet troops massed at the border. One large German force nearly reached Moscow before the onset of winter froze it in its tracks. Another force marched toward the Soviet Union's oil-rich Caucasus region. Oil played a key role in Axis strategy. Hitler already controlled oil fields in Romania, but he sought more oil to keep his war machine running. He also hoped to cut off Allied oil from the Middle East. But first he had to secure North Africa by pushing the British out of Egypt. In 1941, Hitler sent Field Marshal Erwin Rommel and his Afrika Korps, a tank-based German army division, to join the Italian army already in North Africa. By June 1942, Rommel's force had taken much of the region and had driven deep into Egypt. Europeans suffer under German occupation. In German-occupied Europe, many people were suffering. Some lived under puppet governments like Vichy France. Others endured harsh military rule. The SS, a brutal military unit within the Nazi Party, forced millions of Europeans to work in the Germans' arms industry. The SS treated Russians, Poles, and other Slavs with special contempt, partly because Hitler claimed the Slavs were subhuman. The Nazis worked them to death and killed large groups of them outright. No group suffered more than the Jews. Hitler had long been obsessed with the Jewish question, how to rid Germany of Jews. He had stripped Jews of their civil rights and had them beaten or killed and confined them to concentration camps. As Germany expanded, more Jews came under Nazi control. Thus, the Jewish question grew more critical. Hitler forced Jews from all over Europe into overcrowded ghettos, small sections of cities that could be walled off and guarded. The largest ghetto established by the Nazis was the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland. Thousands of people died in the ghettos from starvation and disease. Gradually, the Nazis decided on what they called the final solution. As part of this plan, they would systematically exterminate the Jews. The slaughter began in the Soviet Union, shortly after the invasion in 1941. Mobile killing squads rounded up and murdered thousands of Soviet Jews at a time. In early 1942, the Nazis built the first of 6 death camps in Poland. Jews, many from ghettos, were shipped to these camps by rail, often packed into cattle cars. Unlike regular concentration camps, these death camps were equipped with gas chambers. Camp operators sealed groups of Jews and other prisoners inside these rooms and turned on the poison gas, usually carbon monoxide. Pregnant women, young children, the elderly, and the sick were killed soon after they arrived. Able-bodied prisoners were kept alive as long as they could work, often at nearby factories. Each death camp could kill tens of thousands of people each month. In addition to Jews, the Nazis also gassed homosexuals, disabled people, captured Soviet soldiers, and gypsies, among others. Allied leaders debate war strategies. When Roosevelt and Churchill met in Washington in 1941, they knew nothing about the Nazis' final solution. Their goal was to figure out how to win the war in Europe. To do this, they had to choose from a number of possible strategies. At the time, the Allies had limited resources. For a few months at least, while the United States gathered troops and war materials, the Allies would have to focus on defending territory against the Axis powers. After that, they would go on the attack, but they had to decide where. They had several choices. Occupied France was a possibility, because the French people would support such an invasion. Also, nearby Britain could serve as a staging area for the massing of troops and resources before the assault. But the German army had a strong presence in France that would make such an invasion extremely difficult. Some thought a direct attack on Italy made more sense. The Italian army was fairly weak, and Italy would provide a good base for securing the rest of Europe. Sailing through the U-boat-infested waters of the Mediterranean, however, would be dangerous. Others wanted to launch the Allied offensive in North Africa, which was not well defended and could serve as a gateway to Europe. But it was also far from the ultimate target, Germany, so it would test the Allies' ability to transport and maintain their forces. Another plan called for moving troops into the Soviet Union to help the Soviet Red Army push back the Germans. The USSR, now one of the Allies, greatly needed its partners' help. But transporting and supplying forces so far from home would require a massive effort.